Well, now that we've got our hive open, we can use this opportunity to also take a sample of adult bees. So what we're going to do is an alcohol wash. That'll give us not only the amount of Varroa mites as an estimate in the hive, which then will allow us to be able to offer treatment guidelines and suggestions to the beekeeper about managing their Varroa mite population, but it'll also allow us to take the sample that we collect for the Varroa mites wash and submit that for Nosema analysis to the labs. So let's get started. I've removed the frame of brood, open brood and capped brood from the hive. I've also made sure that there is no queen on the frame. That's a really important step because we definitely don't want to get rid of our live queen inside of the hive. So you'll notice we've got brood on both sides. We also have a nice population of adult bees, and these are going to be part of our sample. So always take one last look, make sure you don't have a queen just to be on the safe side. And then we're going to get ready. As you notice, we prepared for an alcohol wash. So we've got our wash tub that we will use to put our bees into and collect them out of, and then also count the number of mites, if any, that come out of our sample. We have our jar that is available from MDAR. It is just a ball jar with a removable screen lid and solid lid, as well as the directions with the sample on the outside of the jar. It's filled with about a cup of 70% isopropyl alcohol or rubbing alcohol that we will use to kill our bees for the sample and also store them to ship them to the lab. In addition to our jar and our wash pan, we also have a half-cup measuring cup. And this is what we're going to use to actually measure the amount of adult bees that we take out of our wash bin and use them for our sample. So let's get started. We've got our frame. I'm going to gently tap the adult bees into the frame. Before we do this, I just want to make sure that my lid of my jar is open. And you'll notice it does have a screen and a removable lid. So I'm going to set those to the side. And now we've got our jar with our alcohol inside, so it'll be available to allow me to scoop bees inside. So I'm going to take our frame that we have and gently tap it to dislodge the bees into the wash bin. You'll notice the foraging bees tend to fly up, so I always wait just a couple of seconds to allow those bees to escape. Those are our foragers. We want to target not only on our frame of open and capped brood, but we also want to target that frame because of the nurse bees, the ones that remain inside the wash tub. Those are the bees that typically do not fly up, and those are the ones that would have the largest amount of Varroa mites. So now that we've got our nurse bees mainly in our sample, I'm going to gently tap our wash bin to get the bees down to the corner. And this will allow me to scoop up here what in essence is almost an exactly half cup of adult bees. And I know this seems probably a little scary at this point, but you just have to keep going and remind yourself that you've been working with live bees the entire time. It just happens to be really close to your hand at this point, but you'll notice they're not stinging. So I'm going to pour these into our jar, and I want to take the rest of our bees and put them back into our wash bin, and we want to put these back into the hive that we got them from. Now, once we have our jar with our sample inside, we can put our lids on top because typically the bees, foraging bees, may fly into this, so you don't want any more bees in your sample, and get rid of any bees that are on the outside. So this is going to be our sample of bees that we're going to allow to sit as we put our frame and any remaining bees that were not used for our sample back into the hive. Now that we have our sample for our Varroa mite alcohol wash, we can actually go ahead and take our data for this sample. So we're going to remove our solid lid. We have shook the jar a few times before we did that to dislodge the mites, and you can see the mites are suspended in that alcohol. I'm going to take our empty wash bin now because we put our bees back into the hive that were alive and remaining, and we want to basically just gently pour out the liquid and then very hard shake any remaining mites that would be inside of the jar into our wash bin of liquid. And we're looking for adult Varroa mites in this sample. Now, while it's always nice to get data when you collect a sample, in this case we like to have 0. So now we can go through and look to see if we see any Varroa mites in our sample. So that is what a Varroa mite looks like right here. So now that we've got at least one Varroa mite to show you, we're left with another bit of sample, and those are our adult bees that are remaining in our jar. So these bees can now be repurposed and used for your Nosema sample. So in essence, we have one mite for our Varroa mites data. Now we're going to use our plastic container that we have, which is a 50 ml conical sample tube here, centrifuge tube. And we're going to try to put as many of these adult bees as we can inside of this centrifuge tube. And this will be the sample that we send off to the lab for analysis. So it's nice to fill the tube as much as possible. you'll notice the bees are wet, but they're not floating inside of the tube. So it's up to you if you would like to leave them floating. If you plan on sending this in the mail, you want to pour off all the sample so it looks like this, so the bees are just wet prior to actually putting that in the Postal Service mail. But if you plan to do this analysis at your own lab, of course you can leave the liquid inside. So this is perfect now, ready for Nosema. Before we ship it, we want to put it into our Whirlpack bag. So you can either use a larger Whirlpack bag like this one. These Whirlpack bags are designed to hold liquid, so they are sterile. So you just want to take the perforated top off. You can see in this bag. And then, of course, whichever bag you use, you want to make sure it's labeled like the bag we have here. And then you would just insert your sample that's been screwed, the lid is screwed on tight inside of the bag, and fold that down. And now you've got a sample that you want to label and put inside our mailing envelope and send to the lab for analysis. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you get some good resources out of these videos, and happy beekeeping in your adventures.